When Senator John Kennedy walked onto the Jimmy Kimmel live stage, nobody expected the next 10 minutes to explode across every corner of the internet. What started as a routine late-night interview turned into a clash of worldviews raw, unscripted, and impossible to ignore. Kennedy didn't come to play games, and Kimmel didn't see the firestorm coming. What really happened behind those blinding studio lights? And why did one man walk out while the other lost the room? You think this is just comedy back home. We call this intellectual fraud with a laugh track. The crowd didn't know whether to laugh or hold their breath, but let's rewind. Just 30 seconds earlier, before that line tore the studio in half. The lights were blazing, studio perfect, air-conditioned chill, fake brick backdrop, and a stage polished to reflect every pixel of production. The camera panned across the audience, young, loud, buzzed on cue card comedy and overpriced cocktails. Laughter wasn't spontaneous here. It was scheduled. A woman in the third row, teeth gleaming, clapped a beat too early. Her hand held something white, laminated, printed bold. The camera accidentally caught it before cutting away. Audience brief card. Instructions. One line stood out. If he mentions guns, laugh. Then came the music. Not the kind you feel in your bones, but the kind made to tell you how to feel. The band hit that late-night groove, and the voiceover rang through, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator John Kennedy." Applause detonated like it had been rehearsed, because it had. A sea of faces turned toward the curtain, but the man who walked out didn't match the rhythm. No wave, no grin, no pause to acknowledge the cameras. Just John Kennedy, black suit, Louisiana tie, and a gait like he was walking into a courtroom, not a stage. His eyes didn't scan the audience. They scanned the perimeter. He stopped short, not mid-step, but enough to break the flow. Something was on the ground near the lip of the stage. A cue card. Must have fallen from the risers. His eyes caught it. Just a flash. Just enough. If he mentions guns, laugh. He bent slightly, picked it up, read it. Not a muscle in his face moved. Then, like sliding a piece of irrelevant evidence into a pocket, he folded it and kept walking. Jimmy Kimmel was already standing, hand extended, smile locked in place like a retail display. Kennedy shook it, firm, dry, one pump, no small talk. Jimmy gestured to the chair. Kennedy sat down without waiting. The applause kept going, longer than natural. Jimmy signaled subtly, "Cut it." The light above the camera blinked once recording. The show was live. Jimmy leaned in, voice smooth as glass, the kind that cuts when it breaks. "Well, Senator, you've got quite the fan base tonight." Kennedy blinked, once. "I ain't here for fans. I'm here for the truth. Though I can see y'all already prepared the punchlines." A nervous chuckle rolled through the crowd. One guy in row 2 elbowed his friend like, "This is gonna be good." Jimmy smiled wider. It didn't reach his eyes. "Don't worry, we'll keep it light." Kennedy turned his head, slow. "Lights for bulbs. I brought daylight." The room hesitated. That pause where people aren't sure if it's a joke or a warning. Jimmy smoothed his tie. "We'll get to your new book in a minute. First, though." Kennedy's eyes flicked once, toward the edge of the stage, where the brief card had been, then to the audience, then back to Jimmy. "You always tell your crowd when to laugh, or just when I walk in." Jimmy's eyebrows lifted. The crowd shifted. There it was, the first real ripple, the beginning of the undertow. "Well," Jimmy said, still holding the script, "we like to keep things moving. Energy, you know?" Kennedy nodded, slow, like he'd just confirmed a suspicion. "Energy's fine. Manipulation's not. Where I'm from, we call that rigging the game." Another laugh from the audience, smaller now. Not nervous yet, but leaning. Jimmy lifted his card stack. A prompt was coming. Kennedy looked past him, up into the rigging, into the black metal grid of lights and cameras and fake brick. He wasn't just looking, he was seeing all of it. And in that moment, just for a breath, the stage didn't belong to Jimmy Kimmel anymore. The studio lights were too bright. The laughter was too canned. And John Kennedy, he didn't blink. He just sat there, still as the South in July, waiting for the first shot to be fired. Backstage didn't smell like showbiz. It smelled like hot coffee, deodorant, and cold nerves. The kind of space where smiles were worn, not felt. Maggie Benton, Kennedy's senior aide and longtime political bruiser, stood just off camera, arms crossed, eyes scanning like a hawk. She'd been through Senate hearings, death threats, and network ambushes. But this was different. This wasn't Washington. This was theater pretending to be truth. She flagged a tech walking past with an earpiece and clipboard, mid-20s, hoodie under blazer, smile practiced. "What's this?" she asked, holding up a small wireless mic pack they'd offered Kennedy. "Oh, just standard lav. We clip it under his lapel. Boosts the room levels." Maggie turned it over. There was a small dial. Odd. "What's this switch?" she asked. The tech hesitated half a second too long. That just adjusts for reverb." Maggie's fingers tightened. "No. This routes to the control booth. Doesn't it?" He didn't answer. She stepped closer, voice low. "If there's a delay, filter, or override baked into this feed, you tell me now." He swallowed. "I just follow the run sheet." Maggie handed it back, slow. "Run sheet's not law. Neither is your script. Don't mess with the signal." The kid nodded and walked off faster than he needed to. Maggie turned to the floor producer, who was pretending to check lighting levels, but had definitely heard every word. Their eyes met. Hers said, "I know." His said, "Doesn't matter." Back in the makeup room, Jimmy Kimmel was mid-touch-up, foundation, light powder, anti-glare, mirror lights ringed his face, a perfect halo for a man about to go viral. He leaned back in the chair, legs crossed, grinning at his segment producer. "He's gonna lose it. I can feel it. That draw's gonna go from calm to combustible in 5 minutes." The producer chuckled. "You sure about that? He's pretty ice." Jimmy pointed to the monitor playing a replay of Kennedy's last Fox appearance. "That man's a tinderbox with a law degree. We just need to hold the lighter long enough." The two laughed. But the laughter wasn't mean. It was business. On the monitor outside, the live show ticked forward, monologue winding down, Jimmy slicing up headlines, ridiculing celebrity court cases, poking at both sides of the aisle. The audience roared. The teleprompter scrolled like a slot machine, hitting every beat. Kennedy stood behind the curtain, watching. He hadn't blinked in over a minute. The makeup girl offered him blotting paper. He declined with a nod. The screen flashed a segment preview, his own face, cropped mid-sentence, under a caption that read, "The senator with punchlines sharper than policy." He said nothing, just stared. Maggie approached, speaking low. "They're clipping your intro, running B-roll from that Hurricane town hall. And the gun line, the one you used in Baton Rouge." Kennedy didn't turn his head. "That's the one where the crowd stood up," she added quietly. He finally blinked. "They're not aiming at the crowd tonight," he said. "They're aiming at the ghost of that line." Maggie's jaw flexed. "They're trying to bait you. They're trying to own me." From the monitors, Jimmy's voice sailed in. "Coming up next, our favorite Louisiana truth-teller, John Kennedy. Don't go anywhere." Cut to commercial. Music swelled, but it didn't feel like transition. It felt like loading a chamber. Maggie looked at Kennedy. "You sure you want to do this?" He straightened his tie, smoothed the sides of his jacket. "This ain't a talk show," he said under his breath. "This is a rigged courtroom with laugh signs." Maggie nodded once, then stepped back. Stagehands moved like ghosts, checking floor tape, switching camera angles. The band cued a country riff banjo light, with a fake southern twang that didn't sit right with anyone from the actual South. The floor director snapped fingers. "Stand by, Senator." Kennedy took one step forward, paused. He looked up, rows of lights, reflectors, lenses aimed like eyes that didn't blink. He whispered once, barely audible, "Let's see how much truth can get through a teleprompter." Then the curtain opened, the crowd clapped, Jimmy smiled, and Kennedy walked into the trap, willingly, like a man walking into his own ambush because he knew who laid it, and because he brought something sharper than a retort. He brought daylight. "Senator, you once said, and I quote, 'If you want to take my gun, you better be stronger than the Constitution.' That went viral faster than a TikTok dance battle. You remember that one." The crowd chuckled, already leaning into the rhythm. The teleprompter flickered behind the cameras, lines pacing Jimmy's cadence. Kennedy didn't smile. His eyes stayed locked on Jimmy's, flat as still water before a storm. Jimmy lifted a finger, theatrically. In fact, we thought we'd have some fun with that tonight. A clip rolled on the monitor above them. The studio lights dimmed slightly as everyone turned their gaze upward. Kennedy, mid-sentence on a stage somewhere, was spliced into a montage. But not just any montage. The audio was cut. The timing chopped. Every 3 words he said were mashed with canned sound effects bowings, gunshots, laugh tracks. A voiceover mimicked his drawl like a cartoon cowboy. If you want to take my yeehaw gun, you better be kapow stronger than the Constitution. The crowd roared. Laughter exploded. Some of it real, most of it planted. A guy in the 3rd row wheezed and slapped his knee like it was the best thing he'd seen all year. The sound engineer boosted the audience channel. Laughter roared louder. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, pretending to be bashful. It was too good. The clip ended with a freeze frame of Kennedy, mouth open, eyes mid-blink, superimposed with the phrase, "Cowboy Constitutionalist." More laughter. Kennedy didn't move. He didn't even blink. 10 seconds. 15. Jimmy shifted in his seat. "You're allowed to laugh, Senator. You still got that Southern sense of humor, right?" Kennedy leaned forward just an inch, enough to silence the second wave of chuckles that had started to build. "Did you edit that yourself?" he asked, voice steady, just above a whisper. Jimmy raised both hands, mock innocent. "Hey, I don't cut tape." Kennedy nodded slowly. That's about right." The silence lingered longer this time. The audience sensed it. Some still smiling, others now frozen with those half grins people wear when they're not sure if they've just crossed a line. Jimmy filled the air. "It's all in good fun. Senator, you're a character. People love a character." Kennedy reached into his jacket. No sudden movements. He pulled out a phone. Old model, no case. Screen slightly cracked at the corner. He tapped it once. A video loaded. He didn't say a word. He turned the screen toward Jimmy first, then held it up just high enough for the front row to see. Same speech. Uncut, raw. Kennedy, on a stage in Baton Rouge, standing in front of a crowd of veterans and single mothers and tired teachers. The words came through the phone speaker low, but clear. "I don't carry this Constitution in my coat because I'm scared. I carry it because there's nowhere left in this country where I trust someone else to carry it for me. No boings, no yeehaws, just truth." Kennedy let it play for 15 seconds, then clicked it off. Looked straight at Jimmy. "You call this fun," he said. Not loud, not angry, dead calm. Jimmy chuckled once. It didn't travel. "We're just lightening the mood. People want to laugh." Kennedy set the phone on the desk between them. "Then tell them a joke. Don't sell them a lie with glitter on top." The words landed with a thud, like something heavy being dropped in the middle of a party. The audience shifted again. Someone coughed, someone else whispered, "Is this still the show?" Jimmy cleared his throat. "We're entertainers, Senator. You know how it works." Kennedy leaned back. Let the chair squeak a little. Let the silence stretch like a rope. "Yeah," he said, "I've seen how it works." He tapped the phone. "Cut a truth into 30 pieces. Wrap it in noise and call it content." Jimmy tried to pivot. "Well, speaking of content, let's talk about your new bill." But the air had changed. It wasn't a studio anymore. It was a reckoning. Kennedy glanced at the blinking light above the camera. "Still live." He looked at the crowd. Not angry, just direct. "You can laugh at anything if you cut it wrong enough." The audience didn't respond. Not immediately. Not in unison. A woman in the front row lowered her phone, stopped recording. A man in the back crossed his arms. Jimmy took a breath, opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Kennedy didn't press, didn't raise his voice, just left the silence hanging there, like a witness no one wanted to cross-examine. Jimmy shifted in his seat, exhaled, and let the silence fade. Then, with a half smile and a flourish like a magician tired of subtlety, he reached behind the desk and pulled out a small plastic revolver. Neon blue. Toy trigger. A red cap at the tip so no one mistook it for anything real. The audience laughed. Immediate. Reflexive. The soundboard operator nudged the laugh track a few notches louder. The lights warmed. Jimmy raised the gun and gave it a little spin. "Relax, folks," he said, mock serious. It's not loaded, at least not with policy. Laughter again. Then came the second part. He set the gun down and reached under the desk again, this time pulling out a laminated prop about the size of a children's menu. A copy of the Constitution, printed on glossy paper, the kind you'd find at a theme park gift shop. Now, Jimmy continued, placing it next to the toy gun. These are the senator's two favorite accessories. At least, that's what the internet tells me. He leaned back, arms open like a man presenting a prize. The crowd laughed again, but softer, less certain now. Some clapped out of habit, others hesitated. Kennedy didn't react. His eyes flicked to the gun, then to the laminated Constitution. Then to Jimmy. He said nothing. Jimmy filled the air. Come on, Senator. This is all in good fun. You've made these things your brand. We're just playing along. Kennedy's hand moved. Not fast, not dramatic, just a slow, deliberate motion toward the inside pocket of his coat. He pulled out a small, worn leather case, unsnapped it, and slid something onto the desk. It wasn't plastic. It wasn't laminated. It was a real, pocket-sized copy of the United States Constitution. The leather cover frayed at the corners, the pages soft from years of touch. A thin red ribbon hung from its spine like a bookmark. He didn't slam it down. He placed it, quietly, exactly between the toy gun and the gift shop copy, then sat back. The room froze. Jimmy opened his mouth, maybe to pivot, maybe to joke. Kennedy raised one hand. Not rude, not forceful, just enough. The universal signal for stop. Jimmy stopped. Kennedy looked at the three objects on the desk, then at the cameras, then back at Jimmy. 5 seconds passed, then 10, then finally, Kennedy spoke. I don't carry this because I'm a politician, he said. I carry it because somewhere along the line, you decided to sell it for laughs. No rise in tone. No dramatics. Just the kind of sentence that doesn't end when the words stop. Jimmy swallowed. Well, he said, trying to recover, some people might say you use that book like a shield, like a prop in your own show. Kennedy nodded. Difference is, I don't charge admission. The audience stirred, a ripple of something unscripted. Jimmy leaned forward, voice a little sharper. We're entertainers. This is what late night does. Kennedy met his eyes. No, this is what late night used to do. Now it dances on graves and sells clips to people who can't sleep. Jimmy blinked. That's a bit much, don't you think? Kennedy tapped the real Constitution once, the sound of leather on wood barely audible, but everyone heard it. You turned that, he said, nodding to the laminated copy, into that, and pointed at the toy gun, so you could skip dealing with this. His finger now resting on the real thing. No one laughed. The band didn't play? Even the laugh track guy had nothing cued. Kennedy leaned back, hands in his lap. I didn't come here to argue. I came to remind you what you've forgotten. Jimmy let the silence drag. Then, in a voice meant to sound relaxed but didn't quite land, he said, Okay, so what should we remember? Senator, Kennedy looked at him for a long time. That some things don't get laughs. Some truths aren't punchlines. And some books aren't props. The lights above them hummed. No music? No cutaway. Just two men at a desk, surrounded by people trying to figure out whether they were watching television or history. Then Kennedy did something strange. He picked up the laminated Constitution and the toy gun, held them for a moment, then reached under the desk and placed both on the floor, out of sight of the camera. Only the real one remained on the table. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just left it there, and looked Jimmy in the eye like he was daring him to touch it. Jimmy didn't. Kennedy didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Just sat there, eyes steady, breath even, like the silence was part of the answer. Then, without a word, he stood up. No cue from the stage manager, no musical bump, no camera pan. He didn't walk toward Jimmy. He walked past him, around the desk, toward the edge of the stage, where the lights were brightest and the distance between performer and audience shortest. The studio crew stirred. One of the camera operators shifted focus, uncertain. A floor producer raised a hand, but no one moved to stop him. There was no script for this. Kennedy stepped to the front of the stage, close enough to see the whites of their eyes. The laughter from earlier had vanished, replaced with a taut, almost reverent quiet. like the moment before a verdict. He scanned the audience slowly, row by row. Then he asked the question, one sentence, quiet, clear. Who among you came here to hear me speak? And who came just to laugh at me? No inflection, no accusation, just the weight of the words. You could feel the room shift, like chairs suddenly mattered, like the space between people grew thick. A man in the third row, maybe late 30s, in a button-up and sneakers, shifted uncomfortably. His eyes darted. Then he reached up and peeled the tiny mic taped behind his ear, pulled it gently, slowly, stood halfway, looked around. No one moved. He sat back down, the mic still in his hand. Jimmy watched from the desk, his smile frozen in place. His fingers tapped the cue cards on reflex, though he wasn't reading them anymore. The woman beside the man whispered something to him. He didn't respond. On stage, Kennedy spoke again. Not every audience is a mob. Not every chair is a trap. The crowd didn't laugh. Didn't clap. They just watched. The floor producer snapped toward the control booth, urgent hand signal slicing the air. Cut wide. Cut now. On the studio monitor, the screen flashed into motion. The control team had triggered a preloaded transition, a fake commercial frame with animated graphics, some canned music, a voiceover teaser for the next segment, but in the room, nothing stopped. Kennedy was still speaking. You were told this was entertainment, he said, but somewhere between the cue cards and the soundboard, somebody decided the truth was too quiet to keep. A stagehand took a step forward from the wings, eyes on the floor director, waiting for instruction. None came. Back at the desk, Jimmy forced a grin, loud enough to be heard. He tried to redirect. Okay, we're getting a little heavy here. Folks, let's bring it back. He gestured toward the band, desperate for a musical pivot. The drummer hit a cymbal too early. It clanged and died. No rhythm followed. No recovery came. Kennedy turned his head, slowly, toward Jimmy. Back to what he asked. To clapping when the cards tell you to laughing on command. Jimmy opened his mouth, closed it, shifted in his chair. The energy in the room had turned, not angry, not even hostile, just awake. Kennedy looked back at the crowd. You ever wonder why the lights face this way? He said, pointing behind him toward the stage rig. So you can't see who's watching you watch? A quiet sound from the audience, someone clearing their throat, or maybe trying not to. Kennedy continued. I'm not the first guest to walk on this stage, but I might be the first to tell you that you're not just here to watch. You're here to be watched. His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. You're part of the product. A woman in the back dropped her phone. The clatter echoed. Jimmy stood now, smoothing his jacket, trying to reassert presence. Let's all take a breath. Senator, this is a comedy show. Kennedy turned back. Then why does it feel like a courtroom? He walked back toward the desk. Not fast, not slow, just certain. Paused once more before sitting. The difference between a joke and a trap, he said, is who gets to laugh after it ends. Then he sat, hands folded, eyes front, and for a long moment, nobody said anything at all. Jimmy stepped off stage during the break. He didn't run, but it wasn't a walk, either. The kind of movement a man makes when his mind is sprinting and his body's trying to keep up. A blur of powder-white hallway, wires taped to concrete, and a floor assistant mouthing questions he didn't hear. Behind the curtain, the sponsor liaison waited. He wasn't part of the regular crew. Sharp suit, clipped tone, Bluetooth in one ear. He stepped in close, too close. You need to cool him down, the man said, voice low, flat, or we lose the segment and the ad slot. We lose the ad slot. You know what happens. Jimmy didn't answer. The man leaned closer. This is already trending, but not the way we want. Jimmy turned back toward the stage. His hand ran through his hair. Not for style, for something to hold on to. Cool him down, the man repeated. Or lose it. Jimmy nodded once, just once, then re-entered the light. Back at the desk, the cameras were already hot again. The break screen had vanished. The audience had quieted into a low rustle of uncertain applause. The director whispered into a headset. The band didn't play. No one told them to. Kennedy hadn't moved, still in his chair, still waiting. Jimmy sat slowly, no smirk, no card in hand. Just a man trying to steer a ship through fog and finding out it's already on the rocks. He cleared his throat. "We're just looking for some joy here. Senator," he said. His voice was softer now. "It's what we do. We're entertainers. We try to find the fun." Kennedy looked at him, not with contempt, but with the calm of someone who's heard that song before. "I don't fault you for trying to make people laugh," he said. "I fault you for selling comfort while people are bleeding." Jimmy blinked. Kennedy continued, "You think this is about guns, or jokes, or ratings? But where I'm from, when someone loses their right to speak or protect their home, no one's laughing, no one's rolling tape." The words sat heavy. No music cue, no applause sign. The studio felt smaller, like the lights had grown hotter. Jimmy tried again. "I don't make policy," he said. "I make a show." Kennedy nodded. "And this is the show. Right here. Where everyone's smiling because the cameras are on. But outside these walls, the lights don't follow people home. Just the consequences." Jimmy looked down at his hands, the fingertips pressing against the desk. Kennedy leaned forward, not to intimidate, just to make the next line land where it needed to. "I'm not here to fight you, Jimmy. I'm here because someone watching this thinks they're alone. They think their beliefs make them the punchline." Jimmy didn't respond. The studio was silent. And Kennedy said the line that would end the evening. "Back home, when you lose the right to defend your voice, or your land, or your family, there's no laugh track, there's just silence. And regret." Jimmy looked up. For the first time, his eyes didn't search the cameras or the crew. He looked directly at the man across from him. No comeback, no clever line. Just a quiet, subtle shift in posture, like a man realizing too late he'd been arguing with a witness, not a guest. He nodded. Once, and for the first time that night, Jimmy Kimmel said nothing. Kennedy stood. There was no music, no applause sign, no prompt from the control booth. Just the sound of one chair moving back, the quiet creak of the studio floor under polished soles, and a silence that carried more weight than 1,000 sound cues ever could. Jimmy didn't stop him. He didn't even try. His eyes followed Kennedy with something closer to respect than defeat. He knew this wasn't a walk-off. This was a man closing his own chapter, on his terms. Kennedy turned once to the crowd. They weren't laughing. They weren't clapping. They were watching eyes wide, some with hands still hovering mid-air, unsure whether to applaud or stay still. Then, one man stood up, in the back row, slowly, like he didn't know why, only that it felt wrong to remain seated. Then another, and another. No chant, no cheer, just people rising, not to celebrate but to acknowledge. Kennedy didn't smile. He didn't wave. That wasn't what this was. He simply nodded once, a movement so slight it might have been missed by the cameras. He walked toward the wings, past the lights, past the band, past the crew, who parted without being told. Just before the curtains swallowed him, he turned one last time. "I didn't walk away from the performance," he said. "I walked in to stop it from turning into a farce." Then he was gone. The lights remained bright, but the room felt dimmer. Jimmy sat in silence. No jokes, no pivot, no outro. Backstage, Maggie was already waiting with his coat. No words exchanged, just a knowing glance. The kind of look you only share with someone who saw what you saw and knew it would echo far beyond the walls of this building. By the time Kennedy reached the exit, clips of the moment were already flooding the internet. No graphics, no edits, just raw footage. A man placing a worn Constitution between a toy gun and a plastic prop, then walking out like it was the most natural thing in the world. And somehow the show went on, the cameras rolled, but something had shifted. Not in the ratings, in the room,